to Spinning Iris and another episode of Banned, Challenged, and Burned, a series where I look at books that are currently or have in the past been challenged, banned, and burned for many reasons. I am going to add a disclaimer from now on. I have a feeling a number of these topics are going to be coming up in the future as I continue to do this series. Anyway, now, why am I making this disclaimer now? Well, the book I will be talking about today is a 260-year-old piece of satire. A satire so dangerous, so threatening, so obscene, it was being banned up until the early to mid-20th century. That's just here in the United States. If more people were reading it in high school now, it probably still would be. I also kind of believe that this book should be required reading for people who decide they want to go into politics or any position of power. It is a book that has inspired intellectuals, artists, and revolutionaries. What little book am I talking about? Well, you ready to find out? Let's go. The book I will be looking at today is a French satire called Candide by Voltaire. Candide was originally published in 1759 with a new edition published in 1761 with additions to chapter 22. The title for that edition was Candide or Optimism, translated from the German of Dr. Ralph, with additions found in the doctor's pocket when he died in Minden in the year of grace 1759. Among the inspirations for this book were the earthquake, tsunami, and fires that struck Lisbon in 1755, the 7 Years' War that was ravaging over Europe, and one of the big brains of the Enlightenment period, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. It's primarily his philosophy that boils down to all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. In the story, our main character, Candide, is ejected from his Eden-like home of Westphalia, where he is separated from his dear, dear teacher, Pangloss, and his beloved, the fair Cunegonde. Almost immediately from being ejected, he gets pressed into military service. In this coming-of-age story, Candide journeys all over the world, seeing wonderful and horrible things, suffers one hardship after another, testing all the while his devotion to the philosophy instilled in him by his teacher Pangloss, that all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. I won't go into too much more detail since I spent the whole of September reading Candide for all of you. That playlist will be linked in the description, so if you want to check that out now, if you got a few hours to spare, you can watch that and come back. Right. So, since I've already read it, and hopefully you've read it too, I should be able to breeze through this quite quickly. Well, after its publication, it was almost immediately denounced by both secular and religious authorities. By the end of February 1759, a month after it was published, the Grand Council of Geneva and the administrators of Paris had banned, and I do believe burned, Candide. In 1762, Candide was listed in the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Roman Catholic Church's list of prohibited books, just one of 41 pieces of literature Voltaire had written, and also on that list. So, the Catholic Church in general has had it banned. Let's see, specifically in the United States, in about 1929, 1930, a U.S. Customs official in New England seized copies that were bound for Harvard. And in 1944, the U.S. Post Office demanded the omission from a mailed Concord Books catalog. So also New England. That was a little confusing. Also, Nazis probably burned it. Seems like something they would do, given how old it is and its subject matter, and its overall message. Let's see. Well, since we've got the Catholic Church involved, obviously religious blasphemy. Political sedition, a word we've all become quite familiar with over the past week. Intellectual hostility. Racism, racial issues, and offensive language. Had to lump those all in there because they all kind of in the same areas in the book. Sexual content. Violence. Dangerous to morale during World War II. That one's overly specific, so I'm going to call that anti-military sentiment. I think that's the right word. Anyway, moving on. So, what horrible things are in this text? Let's find out. Religious blasphemy. Chapter 4. My friend, said the orator, do you believe that the Pope is the Antichrist? What a day for an auto da fe. Chapter 11. I am the daughter of Pope Urban X and the Princess of Palestrina. Chapter 16. Let's eat a Jesuit. Let's eat a Jesuit. Let's see. Then there's also all the clergymen behaving badly from... We have Cunegonde's oversexed inquisitor. We have her Cunegonde's brother, who was ordained a Jesuit priest, father, something, and all of his bad behavior. The abbé in chapter 22 that Candide meets in Paris, and all of his horrible, horrible behavior. And the understandable behavior of Brother Giroflée. Speaking of which, chapter 24, the monastery is filled with jealousy, discord, and anger. Oh, and here's a delightful one from chapter 28. I didn't know it was a crime for a Christian to be found naked with a Muslim. Political sedition. Now, when I was putting this together, I didn't quite know what that term meant, especially in context here, so I had to look that up. Basically defined as incitement of discontent or rebellion against a government, which we all know now. If I can find one, I think I'll put a link in the description for someone who can define sedition better than I can. And especially if you want to understand it in context of things going on now. Anyway, believe it or not, there's not too many that stand out. The few that do. Chapter 18. I certainly have no right to prevent foreigners from leaving. That kind of tyranny is sanctioned by neither our customs nor our laws. All men are free. There's a lot happening in chapter 22, so especially at a certain dinner party that Candide goes to. Go check out that chapter there. It's a bit long, but I believe there is some talk in it that could be deemed seditious. Chapter 26. One dethroned king. One dethroned emperor. Another dethroned king. A dethroned king again. A dethroned king twice over. And then another one, which I'll go ahead and I'll read that out to you. I'm Theodore. I was elected King of Corsica. I was called Your Majesty. Now I'm scarcely called Sir. I had money minted, and now I'm penniless. I had 2 secretaries of state, and I now have only 1 valet. I once sat on a throne, and for a long time I lay on a bed of straw in a London prison. I am afraid I may be given the same treatment here, and even though I'm come to Venice like Your Majesties for the carnival. And then finally, probably one of the best lines in the book, chapter 30. I assume that in general, those who take part in public affairs sometimes perish miserably, and that they deserve it. Yeah. Yeah. Intellectual hostility. Oh, you mean the whole book? It's basically the whole book poking holes in the Leibniz theory. Okay, I'll give you a few specifics. Chapter 19. What's optimism? Asked Cacambo. Alas, said Candide, it's a mania for insisting that everything is all right when everything is going wrong. And then there's the whole of chapter 25, a visit to a Signor Poco Corante, Venetian nobleman. Seriously, go and read that chapter or go listen to that chapter and imagine it's your favorite YouTube critic or reviewer. It's just hilarious. That chapter holds up surprisingly well given how old it is. It's basically a critique of the critic. And then for another brief one, chapter 30. Let's work without theorizing, said Martin. It's the only way to make life bearable. Racial issues, racism, and offensive language. In my translation in particular, there are a few archaic words used for people of color and for people of a certain area of the world. Primarily in chapters 11 and 12, the old woman's story, since she went through the most horrific stuff. I suppose we could consider calling the native cannibals in South America the Ourillons, which literally translates as mumps, as offensive, probably, although it was done on purpose. Satire, you know. Although in chapter 19 we do get a look at some of the more disturbing aspects of colonial trade. As Candide trying to get out of South America, he comes across a slave kind of lying in the road, and the man gives him his story. If we get a finger caught under the millstone while we're working in the sugar mills, they cut off the whole hand, and if we try to run away, they cut off one of our legs. There's a lot more that goes into that little story, but it is disturbing. It's very brief and a small fraction of some of the terrible things that happened. Yeah. Not sure if there was anything else offensive-wise in terms of the language used. I'm not sure if there's anything in there that anybody back in the 18th century would have found offensive language-wise. I may have missed something. It's quite possible. Sexual content. I'm kind of glad I started off this series with the Sleeping Beauty saga. It's probably the most sexually explicit book I've ever read. So this is practically G-rated. Well, we do get our first little taste of the sexual content in chapter 1. Where is it? One day, as Cunegonde was walking near the castle in the little wood known as the park, she saw Dr. Pangloss in the bushes, giving a lesson in experimental physics to her mother's chambermaid, a very pretty and docile little brunette. I think we all know what was going on there. And we also get the, I guess you could call it a sort of make-out session between Cunegonde and Candide there at the end of the chapter. Of course, they could be just offended by the pictures in the book. A lot of the translations have some illustrations that are a bit racy. You know, bare chests and all that. Most of the sexual content comes as a result of the war going on around the characters, especially for Cunegonde, which I won't read here. I'll just put a thing for the chapter there for you. The old cause and effect. And there's the old woman's story, of course, chapters 11 and 12, again. Man, that old woman. And a quote at the end of chapter 11, "Oh, what a misfortune to be without testicles." For sexual content, too, we've got the genealogy of Pangloss's case of syphilis in chapter 4. Again, cause and effect. And then there's Candide's PG-rated tryst with the woman in Paris. Violence. Again, there's too many incidents throughout the book to describe something that could be considered violent, or that really is violent. And again, a lot of it is connected with the war going on around the characters. I guess I could give a few examples of things considered violent. Chapter 1, Baron Thunder Ten Tronckh drove Candide from the castle with vigorous kicks. Of course, Candide running a gauntlet, basically saying, "Kill me," at the end. And then, chapter 11, I saw my mother and all our Italian women torn and cut to pieces, slaughtered by the monsters who were fighting over them. And then chapter 28 for both the young Baron and Dr. Pangloss. A judge had me beaten 100 times on the soles of the feet and sentenced me to the galleys. Again, there's just too much in there. And 7, the overly specific anti-military sentiment during World War II, specifically, which I find a little strange. Basically, half of chapter 3, here's a good line. Candide, trembling like a philosopher, hid himself as best he could during this heroic carnage. That's while he was in military service and basically went AWOL. And chapter 20 from Martin. A million regimented assassins sweep over Europe from one end to the other, murdering and robbing with discipline to earn their bread because there's no more honorable occupation. If anything, I think it's a pretty good reproach, and that any soldier reading that might say, maybe I should not do that. But again, I think it's rather obvious Voltaire knew Candide was going to ruffle many, many feathers when it was published, because it was published simultaneously in 5 different countries. In early 1759. And he didn't admit to being the author until 1768, so even though everybody kind of already knew it was him. What was the backlash from readers, you might ask? Well, from the numbers I found, by the end of 1759, it sold about between 20,000 to 30,000 copies, making it a bestseller. That is the best kind of backlash there is. And of course, that ban in the U.S. back in 1929 was lifted pretty quickly. It did affect the Harvard class it was going to, but it was lifted. And it was completely lifted in 1950 in the United States. Can't speak for anywhere else in the world, since I guess nobody cares. Another excellent backlash. It inspired a brilliant operetta by Leonard Bernstein and several lyricists, which I do highly recommend. It's a lot of fun. Also, the greatest backlash of all, Candide has never been out of print. Happily, in the United States at least, to my knowledge, nobody is banning Candide. In fact, the American Library Association has nothing on their website about it. I really wish they had more info on their website besides just the current stuff. I want to see some of the old stuff. Probably the reason why it's not listed or is not banned as frequently or at all is because it is, to my knowledge, only taught on university levels. It might still be taught in some high schools or is optional reading for high schoolers. I don't know. I'd also wager the easily offended people would probably not understand what they're reading to begin with. Or it's just so old now that people just don't want to bother with it. I do understand, however, why people in power, when this was published, would be nervous about a book like this. We are talking about pre-revolutionary France here. Things were not happy. So why is this book relevant today? Maybe old and full of things that people now in the 21st century look at, might think sound foreign and strange, but there are just as many things in it that are still recognizable. Hypocritical religious persons, nonsensical wars, natural disasters, and replaceable political leadership. This is a coming-of-age story after all, so I think there are maybe many people out there who can relate to Candide the character on some level. He is a one-dimensional character, but I think that he does go through things that are relatable, like getting kicked out of your house because of behavior deemed taboo by your family. Many of us have that wake-up moment where we realize a lot of the things we were taught when we were young are false, or were only a small fraction of what the reality is. We meet people in our journey through life who inspire us to think and even to take action to better ourselves and others. Or maybe you have that high school crush that you carry a torch for years, and then you see them at the next reunion and you realize they are not what you remembered them to be. Because that does happen with Candide and Cunegonde. I remember the first time I picked up Candide, nobody forced me to. I was inspired to pick it up by, surprisingly enough, the band directors who had picked the song from Bernstein's operetta, Make Our Garden Grow. And the way they talked about it got me intrigued to look for it, and then my favorite rifleman from the Sharp TV series, and the way he spoke about it, got me intrigued even more to read it. And boy, am I glad I did. I think it's made me a better reader and a better thinker. I did have to read it again in college, but you know what? I don't mind rereading books that I like. And I do like this. For all of its weird little flaws, it is an enjoyable read. It is an enjoyable book. It's especially one to share with others. If you didn't enjoy it or thought it was boring, you know what? That's fine. Not everybody likes satire. In fact, Voltaire would probably be okay with you not liking it too, so long as you made the decision yourself not to like it and didn't have somebody telling you not to like it. And the message at the end of the book is a really good one. Thinking about and talking about and debating about life, the universe, and everything is perfectly fine, but don't let it get in the way of taking care of yourself and the people and things that matter to you. Tend your garden. We can't control everything. All we can do is take care of what we are able to. Well, I think that wraps up Candide by Voltaire. If you like this video, please hit the like button. In the comments down below, have you read Candide? Let me know what you thought about it. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you share it with your dog? No. If there's any other questions you think I should be asking, or any other aspects of banned books I should be looking at, or if there are any banned books you want me to look at, please let me know. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.